Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Goffstown School Board meeting. I call the meeting to order at 6:32. If we can rise and say the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so just to remind everyone, we are going to go into a non-public session, and then we'll take a recess and we'll come back after and go on with our board meeting. So I'll need a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A 32I, consideration of matters relating to the preparation for and the carrying out of emergency functions, including training to carry out such functions developed by local or state safety officials that are directly intended to thwart a deliberate act that is intended to result in widespread or severe damage to property or widespread injury or loss of life.
So moved.
So moved.
By Caroline, second by Shane. I'll do roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes, and yes. So we're in non-public, so we're going to go down
Yep.
to the... All right, hello, everybody. Sorry for being longer than we anticipated. We did call the meeting to order at 6:30, and we did say the Pledge of Allegiance. So we're going to start with correspondence.
A couple things this evening. The first is, I shared with the board, this was our agenda from, hey Lil, the session that we had this weekend with our student reps across the state, so I included that agenda.
Okay.
I'm very appreciative that Lil was able to join us. The second thing that I have is a letter from the New Hampshire Association, or the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, NEAS&C. We had to submit a 5-year progress report, and they accepted our findings, so that letter's there. And the last piece is, I included in correspondence a copy of a memo that I have given to Mrs. Kohler. This specifically addresses the public complaint that we had about the middle school library and the young adult selections. I'm going to include this. I asked Mrs. Warren to include this in the minutes so that anyone who wants to see the memo can go ahead and see it without submitting a right-to-know request to me. And that's what's in the correspondence folder tonight.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Accommodations, good news. Lily?
Hi, everyone. So, haven't been here for a while. Apologize for that. But I'm back, and winter sports season is back and running. So that's super exciting. Super thankful and grateful to go to that meeting this weekend. It was really nice. There were, Brian, 29 students there?
Yeah, I think we had 30 students from 22 or 23 different school districts.
Wow, that's great.
So it was really nice to meet everyone and get to talk to them about some of the similarities and some of the differences on their school boards and what challenges they face on their board, and what we have in common. And so I learned something from that meeting where the Bedford School District in Durham, I know Bedford does it, but basically they have a policy in place where student reps get a non-binding vote at the table. So that would mean that the student rep's vote doesn't count towards the yay or nay, but it would be recorded, so that way people can go back and look at what the student said. And obviously completely optional vote. You don't have to say yes or no for various reasons. But I just thought that would be something that the board might want to consider. Because another concern that I have kind of been hearing a lot is that certain people that have come up to me and been like, hey, I was really hoping to become the school board rep next year, but now I'm really, really nervous. Or now I am super anxious and I don't think I can do that, or stuff like that. And I just hope that we can kind of get back to the culture of supporting the student rep and their voice, and letting the students, especially in student council, know that their voice matters, and the student rep position is, it's illegal not to have a student rep in New Hampshire. So it's a very important position, and it's not an easy one, to say the least. So I've had a lot of people who, mainly three, that I was looking into like training, like Caleb Hagner did with me my sophomore year. So that way they could like shadow me and just kind of understand what the board is about and what meetings look like. And they have all come up to me and said, I can't do this. I'm way too nervous. I don't know how I would fit into this board. And I just hope we can kind of get that back, because it's a very important position, and I don't want this board to be like searching for a student rep. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Is there anything else?
I think that's it.
All right, well, you said that great. I agree with you.
Thank you so much.
I have a few
ahead.
things. So over at Bartlett, they did their annual turkey trot before Thanksgiving. Students and staff completed a 1-mile walk together and came together as a school community. They also were able to donate 300 non-perishable goods to the Goffstown Food Network Food Pantry. Glen Lake also participated in the food drive, and they collected over 390 non-perishable items. Maple Avenue also took part in that with 2,937 items donated. Over at Maple Ave, they also wanted to mention that each classroom offered an in-class spelling bee at the end of November, and our 4th graders will go on to participate in a grade level spelling bee at the end of this month. The winner will go on to the state competition in February. And the annual 4th grade holiday concert will be held here at Goffstown High School on Tuesday, December 12th. And the performance is called Starbucks. Over at Mountain View, they also participated in the Goffstown Food Network Drive, and they collected 3,351 non-perishable goods. They also had a drama performance last week called The Book Report of Destiny. They had 2 evening shows and a daytime performance for our 5th and 6th grade students. And we had over 46 students that were involved in the production, all between actors, crew, set design, which is a really large number for Mountain View, which is exceptional. And I'd also like to remind families at home that on December 6th, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office will be presenting an internet safety presentation over at Mountain View. And the session will be held in the Hilltop from 6 to 7:30 and will cover social networking, apps, internet blogs, and other technologies that predators are using to exploit teens. So really great presentation that we're hoping a lot of families will take advantage of.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Anyone else? Commendations, good news? No one? All right. Moving on, do we have public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, so I'll close public comment. Next is approving November 6th, 2023 school board meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look at them? Anybody see anything? I'll move to approve. Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous, 1 abstention. Get that, Denise? Thanks, Ginny. All right, committee reports, A and F.
All right, I'll start it off. The A&F committee met tonight at 6 p.m. Although there were 6 items that you'll see as a result of that, I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. The first are the approval of 2 sets of manifests, reason being we didn't meet at the last meeting. It was canceled. So the first manifest is from November 20, I'm sorry.
November
scratch
6th.
that. The 26th, right.
No, November 6th.
Hold on, I gotta get it here. I got it. And that is in the amount of $1,910,915.60, of which a little over $1.3 million is related to payroll, taxes, and benefits. Special ed activity during that manifest totaled approximately $75,000 and comprised of out-of-district services as well as special ed contracted services. and special ed transportation. For those of you who don't know, we do use a provider other than Durham. So Safe Wheels was on there because we do sometimes engage with another provider when Durham cannot provide the transportation. For general expenses, that total was almost $370,000. The most noteworthy was a payment to Field Turf for the GHS Turf Field project. That is a combination of multiple sets of funding, grants, private donations, and school impact fees. Some other noteworthy ones that are on there was we did Gov Connection was milestone security licenses, New Hampshire musculoskeletal. We do provide an athletic trainer contract. And some of you might not know that, so we do have an athletic trainer who is at Goffstown High School and some Mountain View athletics. And lastly, Performance Food Service was almost $20,000 for food and commodities. So are there any questions for that first manifest, the 6th through the 20th of November?
Anybody have any questions, comments? If not, I'll need a motion.
Move to approve manifest of November 6th.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Go ahead,
Thank you. The
Scott.
second manifest is from November 22nd through December 4th in the amount of $1,948,117.48, of which over $1.5 million is for payroll, taxes, and benefits. Special ed activity was a little over $182,000, of which the lion's share of that was for Durham School Services for both in-district and out-of-district transportation. I will share with you that our costs for out-of-district special education are much, much higher because we have more placements and expect to see a budget transfer in the months ahead because we're going to need to move monies from regular ed transportation to special ed transportation. Also, the cost of those services has also increased, but just wanted to keep you abreast of that so you're not surprised in the months ahead. For general expenses, a little over $125,000. You'll note that there's the one from Gov Connection, a little over $51,000 is for IT equipment, specifically laptop carts and the associated licenses. We do pay the town of Goffstown for sewer fees for a couple of our schools. And then we also had a couple of employees who received reimbursements for professional development as a result of the CBA with our teachers union. So any monies that are not allocated at the end of the year are redistributed to those who might have made payments on their own, and that was the result of why you're seeing some of that. Food service is Performance Food Service, a little over $9,000.
Anybody have any questions, comments for Scott? Okay, I'll need a motion to approve.
Move to approve the manifest of November 22nd.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second? By Ginny. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Go ahead, Scott.
All right, so the next topic is your municipal bond discussion, or your municipal lease, I should say. It's a lease purchase. And for those of you, just to refresh your memory, we did engage with a company called EMC, Energy Management Consultants. That company over the last 2 months has conducted an extensive inventory and assessment of all of our school buildings, including, but not limited to, our roofs, our mechanical systems, our asphalt, you name it. They've looked at it, and they have provided the administration and you will get that report as well, a comprehensive report as to all of the different needs in our schools. So as a reminder, and Brian and I were talking about this today, Glen Lake School is approaching almost 20 years. It's coming up. Mountain View is over 30 years. And for those of like you, I remember we did a bond to renovate this high school over 20 years ago. So we are starting to see the need, just like it would be anybody's home, where we have to do a lot of improvements on our mechanical systems, roofs, asphalt. If you've been to Mountain View, you know that that road is a little bit rough. Some of the parking lots are a little rough. So they did a very comprehensive review. Their premise for a municipal lease purchase is to leverage energy savings that one might be able to get by changing over to more energy efficient HVAC systems, weatherization. New roofs also have the ability to save money on energy, as well as lighting, you name it. They've looked at all of those. Better efficiency boilers. I don't know if anyone has replaced their home boiler or their home heating system, but now these are much more energy efficient. You save a lot of money on your fuel bills. And most importantly, Eversource pays tremendous amounts of rebates for when these new systems are installed. And what is super, super nice is that the Governor and Executive Council have extended a program called New Hampshire Saves. Not only does that apply to you as individuals and as homeowners, so if you were to replace your heating or cooling system, you're eligible for rebates to attain a more efficient system, but it's also for municipalities and school districts. So what this company, EMC, did is they assessed all of our systems, and they attached energy savings and the rebates. So what we initially talked about when we were in our retreat was a municipal lease purchase on the ballot in March of 2024, and then a bond. Unfortunately, there's an unfortunate and a fortunate part. There is a lot to digest in the report that we received. However, what I shared with the A&F committee, and I showed them the Excel spreadsheet and the model that has been provided to us. There appears to be the ability for us to proceed with many items on our current CIP, like the heating controls project, replacing boilers, etc. There is the ability to do a lease purchase, and because of all of the incentives and the energy savings, it could cost the district absolutely nothing, because the energy incentives from Eversource serve as your down payment, and then the savings that you get on electricity and propane offset, in terms of performance, the cost of amortizing that through a lease purchase. So this company, EMC, the intent is to have them come before you, the school board, in the next couple of months to demonstrate to you the ability to proceed with a lease-type purchase. This is something very analogous to what you do for computer laptop leases. As long as there is a non-appropriation clause, legally the school board or a board of selectmen can engage in a lease purchase agreement as long as there's a non-appropriation clause. The models that they have shared with us is that we would be able to do about $3 million worth of projects that include heating control upgrades, lighting upgrades, and boiler type replacements in almost all of our schools. And the net cost would be negligible, meaning that it might be a few $1,000s up to $10,000 a year payment, tops, over a 15 to 17 year period, because of all of the energy savings that goes along with it. That would be a phase one type approach. And then there are additional phases that might be your roof systems, windows, pavement, etc. And that would be a phase two or a phase three. And that might be more, much more costly in terms of more like $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 a year payment. That might be more suitable for putting it out on the warrant. But again, that'll 1 year will give us plenty of time for March of 2025 to go that route. So the unfortunate part is that we got a lot of information. The fortunate part is that I believe that EMC has demonstrated to the superintendent, myself, Randy, and others that we can do a lot of our CIP projects, the ones that I just mentioned, at almost no cost based upon the rebates and the energy savings. So that's really, really good news. They have done, Brian was there, it is an extensive list, and we're going to get you a copy of that report in the months ahead, probably the next month, but it's extremely comprehensive. They identified things, honestly, that were not on our CIP, which is a good thing. But the nice thing is that everything that was on our CIP is in their report. There's just a whole lot more that they have identified. So that's what I wanted to share with you. No action is needed this evening, but when you do not see a municipal lease purchase on the draft warrant article that I'm about to talk about in another minute, that's the reason why. Because I don't think that based upon what EMC has presented, one is needed due to the cost. And I think we'll still be able, or we still believe that we'll still be able to accomplish all of those things. So more to follow over the next couple of school board meetings, but I wanted to share with you that.
Scott, before you leave the topic, if I can just ask a question to you. So the reason that we started to look into this is because we recognize that we have millions of dollars on our capital improvements plan with no funding methodology. So we have an awful lot that we're going to need to do in the years to come. Scott, in the report, what was that number that they provided us with of how much money we're going to need to spend for our existing infrastructure?
You ready? 32 million. That's more than existing, because there were some measures that they talked about, which if we were to consider things like solar, you don't do solar unless you're putting a new roof on. But there are opportunities for solar if you did replace a roof where it would have a lot of payback in terms of savings on your energy efficiency. But it was a lot more than the $10 million that we had in CIP, a lot more. So one of the things too, a great example, was we had estimates on our CIP. Heating controls was a perfect example. Our conversations with Randy, we had estimated those to be around $100,000 for heating controls. EMC's estimate was almost $200,000 per school, Maple and Bartlett. But with the energy incentives and the rebates, it's under 100, and then it gets amortized. So, and that's just on the incentives alone. So there are rebates available on a heating control specifically where it's like 50%. And then with the energy efficiency and amortizing that over a 15, 17-year period of time, the cost is negligible, almost nothing. So that's kind of, that's the exciting part of it. So there's more to follow, but I always feel it's good to at least get that out, and then we'll talk about it pretty much on every agenda. We'll talk a little bit about it as we learn more, but expect to have a presentation by EMC probably in either late January, early February. I think it would make sense. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if the board wishes to take action, certain things like lighting we can do. If we're going to replace like LED lighting in our schools, the lead time on that could be like 3 to 4 months to order the lights. Other things, as the superintendent has talked about before, boilers, it could take you like 9 months to get a boiler in certain situations. So we have to be very mindful of supply chain things, so that even though we may want to proceed, like say this summer on some of these projects, it might not be till next summer that we can actually execute on them due to supply chain.
And availability of
and
contractors.
And the contractors, all that. So it's...
So hang on, Scott. Ellen had her hand up before you go on.
Just everything Scott said, I think is terribly important for Budget Committee and the general public to hear multiple times. But also, I mean, I was involved in every one of these building projects over these centuries. But it's even hard for me to grapple with how old our new buildings are. It's really hard to hear 20 and 30 years. And I think the public may have the same kind of reaction I have when I hear Mountain View, 30, what? Or, and Glen Lake particularly.
Yeah.
But emphasizing, yes, they're new to, many people still consider them new to us, but they're not that new anymore, and we need to maintain them just like we maintain our homes. It might be very shocking, I think, to the public to hear that these things need to be done in our schools. So just, and everything else that Scott said, I think it's very worthwhile hearing over and over.
Thank you, Ellen. Appreciate that. Anyone else for Scott? A
Yeah,
question? Go ahead, Nicole.
Not a question, but just thank you very much for doing that work, because I know, especially with, recent tax bills and all that, everyone's very concerned about how much money is being spent. So it sounds like this is actually a really great effort that you guys went through to hire this company to come in and make sure that we had all these numbers correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
The next one, I know you have a pretty heavy agenda, so in terms of
Good.
deposit into the facilities capital reserve, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the draft warrant. So I put before you a draft warrant. There's no action that's needed by the school board this evening. However, at the next meeting, December 19th, is that what it is?
I think it's the 18th.
18th, right. Yeah, 2 weeks from today. That's typically when the school board does make its recommendations to either recommend or not recommend an article. What you are going to see is what we have in the past. The first article is your election of officers. The second article has to deal with your operating budget, one of which Jared has been working with the budget committee on. And then the third one would be your deposit into the capital reserve fund. So one thing I wanted to stress here is that even if we proceed with the municipal lease, the capital reserve fund, there are things that are not eligible for a municipal lease or things that break down, where having that capital reserve fund is kind of mission critical. And we have leveraged that in some of our purchases when equipment has broken down, like a boiler and things like that. So it would be our recommendation to continue funding the capital reserve fund in that vein. And then the last one is a petition warrant article. And that has to do with security locks at our schools. And by petition, that will appear on the warrant. And the board will have to make a recommendation as to the petition warrant article. All of these articles, the moneyed ones, which are 3 out of the 4, the numbers 2, 3, and 4, also go before the budget committee for their review and their recommendation. Are there any questions on the draft warrant? It's so similar, with the exception of the petition warrant article, it's pretty much what we've done in recent years. No really big surprises there. All right, the draft default budget, as I mentioned in our A&F committee, the default budget is one that is under the authority of the school board. So this is the base budget that we've been talking about since we started our budget discussions. And for the most part, as you know, we saw increases in a lot of items that the board had really no control over, whether that be special ed out of district placements or increases in health insurance and those types of things. There was only one instance in terms of a reduction of a one-time expenditure, and that was for the turf field, and it was a grants, $500,000 that came off. But by and large, you kind of, I know Jared's very familiar because he deals with it every single budget committee meeting, but the default budget has to be approved by the school board, and at the meeting in 2 weeks, I'm going to ask that you do that, and then it requires your signature, and then that goes to the Department of Revenue. So the purpose of that default budget is should the proposed budget fail in March, that is the budget that is the fallback budget for the school district. And last but not least, you'll see on here, we discussed in A&F policy KFR, that is your facility use. And I'm working with our Randy Loring and Justin Huff on some changes. We do, now that we have a turf field and lights, there has already been interest in folks renting that turf field and lights, so now we're working on developing a rate for that, and we kind of need that for the spring. So that's going to be coming before you. I also, goes hand in hand with policy KFR, is I had a conversation or email dialogue with Ellen, who received a feedback from someone in the community regarding our position on bounce houses. So I'm not sure if I had mentioned this to you, but our insurance company, Primex, does not insure the school district, nor any school district, nor any municipality that they insure for bounce houses, meaning that if there were to be an accident related to a bounce house, however small or, God forbid, catastrophic, there would be no insurance for the school district. There is an argument to be made that the bounce house company or the individual who are holding the event could have insurance and then name the district as what's called an additional insured. Unfortunately, most of those policies are about $1 million, and our policies through Primex are $5 million at a minimum. So I spoke with our defense counsel about this, and at a minimum, we would want higher liability limits from either the bounce house company or the individual or the entity that's holding the event. It would also require our school district council to review that policy every time to make sure that we were properly covered for a exposure, if it were to happen. So more to follow on this one, but it does not look like it's favorable for us to waive or not include this in our policy. So when I do bring before you policy KFR and the changes for rates, I'm going to include not only that the current language which says we don't allow for trampolines, but anything that relates to bounce houses as well. So I know there are those in the community that love bounce houses. Wendy, I know, uses every spring you get one, right? But I'm only kidding. But it's problematic. So we'll see if there's any other options out there, but it doesn't look good at this point. And that's all I have.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Just
Thanks,
real
Scott.
quick, that information that we're no longer allowing them on school property came to me from a group that, this is how they raise funds, and they have for years. And so I asked about it, and that's why I asked, because I think we need to make it very well known, if we haven't already, that and maybe even send them a letter or communicate with them early on, that the school district can, if this is the way the board's supporting, can no longer have these trampolines, bounce houses on school property.
And right now, it's not in our policy KFR, it just says trampoline. So when people do, so I had to notify the PD when they do their national night out, I had to say to them, I'm sorry, but things due to changes, I can't allow you to have bounce houses. And then there was another entity, same thing, where I think we have like a Spring Fest here. So those folks have been notified, but Ellen is correct. That's why it's important for us, whatever direction we take, just to put it in the policy so it's clear.
And we need to let the people know ahead of time, so they can make, I mean, at least one of the groups went to St. A's, to whatever they were doing, so they could use, but I think we need to let the people know ahead of time if they need to make a different arrangement.
Right, definitely. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Scott. Are you all set?
All set, yeah.
All right, moving on. Budget Committee, Jared.
Hello, everybody. Several meetings happened. Our next Budget Committee meeting is tomorrow, which we will be reviewing the water precincts, which should go very relatively quickly. And then they are reviewing the school budget in totality again, all of tomorrow. So I am hoping that at the end of tomorrow, I know, Brian, you're giving me that look. I'm sure you heard about some of my fun times. So I'm hoping at the end of tomorrow, we will have an agreement that would then go to public session on January 9th of what our proposed budget ought to be. I know Retta came this past time for a little bit, just to hear the fun stuff going on at the town, which I will now provide all of you, since I know that you want to know. Going to be fast and loose on some of these numbers. Scott will probably try to correct me, but let's just move past it. So for the town, our current budget is $24,690,800. That's this year, what we're working on. The default budget is $25,240,834, which is $550,000, give or take, more than the current year budget, which is roughly a 2.2% increase. The proposed budget is $26,911,079, which is an increase of $2,220,000 over current year's budget, which is roughly a 9% jump for the town. That doesn't include 4 additional collective bargaining agreements that are going before the town. So what we are looking at in totality for the town at this point right now is, if we also include our increase in our default, we're looking at roughly $3 million more than this fiscal year for next year.
For the
So-
school or the town?
Everything. Town and school. That's the minimum if we just went with the defaults. If both of our budgets, as of right now, as proposed, we would be looking at roughly, I had it, a little over $5 million increase from this fiscal year. So, again, we're talking about our third warrant article of refresh into our capital reserve fund. There are 4 collective bargaining agreements going on with the town. There is a CRF that the library is putting forward as well to start building some of the things that they need, just like we did many years ago. The only changes that have occurred in all of our deliberations is there was an increase in one of the line items in the library of $50,000. So all of this time that we have spent reviewing the school budget, reviewing the town budget, all those hours, all those questions has amounted right now into one change to what was presented to the budget committee. That's why Scott and I are getting together tomorrow. I imagine there's going to be a lot of changes coming to the school budget. Just like when we get together on December 19th for the town, there'll be a lot of changes at that point in time. I don't like the way that the budget committee did it this year. Normally, as we went through, just like when we go through our budgets, we ask questions, we make changes right away. We don't wait till the very end and review everything. That's what the budget committee seems to be doing. So if you want to bring me some coffee tomorrow and Scott some coffee for our long meeting that we're going to have, we welcome it. But I hope to be able to report back to you at our next meeting how we did. So a lot of words, a lot of things, but I wanted to at least let everybody know, like Nicole said, a lot of people are complaining about their taxes that they got in December. We're looking anywhere from $3 million to over $5 million. That's not including the additional warrant articles that are going to be coming for CBAs as well. Any questions? Or what questions, I should say?
Do you know what % increase that is for that 5 million if both pass?
Well, I know that the town would be 8.99, and we're looking at what?
We were over 7.
7% for an increase? So,
All right, thank
So
you,
we are.
Jared.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Jared.
it. Anybody questions, comments to Jared? All
Try to
right,
make it fun.
moving on, PNC, Retta.
Yes, PNC met this evening. Our meeting was abbreviated. We did begin to look at some of the nominations that have been made for the 2 awards, but we weren't able to finish that. So we will be meeting again on December 18th prior to our board meeting at 6:45 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
And we will be bringing those to the
non-public.
board, non-public at the end.
Okay, thank you. All right, policy review, we did meet in November. There's only 3 policies to come forward tonight for first reads. That's later in the agenda. We meet on Monday, December 11th at 5:30 at the SAU. C&E.
C&E did meet in November. Our next meeting is December 11th at 7 p.m. at the SAU. And for our C&E highlights for our November meeting, I believe we're going to do them now.
We're
No,
actually
there's
going to
a
have a
presentation.
presentation this evening, Ginny, so if you'd
Yep.
like, we can just wait for those presentations.
Okay, very good.
All right, you're all set?
I'm all
Thanks,
set,
Judy.
thank you.
SAU, Shane?
Yep, the SAU 19 board is meeting this Thursday at 6:30 at the SAU offices. This is going to be a board budget hearing along with the board meeting for December. So,
Thank you, Shane.
thank you.
All right, Town of Goffstown School District budget hearing. We got that from Jared already. That's on the back, January 9th. Deliberative session is February 5th at 7 p.m. in the theater here at the high school. And the superintendent's report is you.
Thank you. I apologize in advance. I have a lot of information to share tonight, so I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. So we're working on a new communication tool for athletics and co-curricular activities here at the high school. We're starting to do a sample and doing a pilot of a program called Sports U, which is a very simple communication tool that will allow coaches to better communicate with team members as well as parents. There's a number of administrative controls and oversights that are built into it, so we think this will be a good, effective communication tool for our coaches. At the end of the winter season, we may be coming to you with a proposal to adopt this platform and move forward, but this year, at this point, we're just doing a pilot for the winter athletics. The New Hampshire primary will be held on January 23rd. I've said this many times, but I just want to make sure everybody knows that will be a distance learning day for all schools in SAU 19. Mrs. Kohler has been working on a Title I in sort of audit that we were selected for, randomly chosen for New Boston, but there were some important changes and updates that she's made, and we had to make a few changes to our website. Specifically, you'll see changes for Bartlett and for Mountain View Middle School. There are certain elements with respect to Title I that we had to prominently display on our website, so we've made those changes. Thank you to Mrs. Kohler for noticing those were needed. The turf field, Mr. Gross, I think he kind of alluded to this. The power is in, and the last step, Scott, is we're doing a voltage drop test, and that's the last step before our final bill, which is around $50,000, will be paid. So we're almost at the end of the tunnel here. On November 14th, we had our first SAU safety meeting with our partners in law enforcement and all principals and administrators from the SAU. Our next meeting will be held in January. We had an administrative PLC session last week that focused on Schoology and digital walkthrough tools, so there'll be more to come there. The Handbook for Advancing Student Learning Committee is up and running. Mrs. Kohler's working with a really motivated, great group. And so this is our master professional development plan that we have to work on collectively with teachers, with support staff. We'll bring this to the board at a later point and then submit it to the state, but this is we're in probably the beginning-ish stages, but more to come. Also, Mrs. Kohler is working on our standards-based report card committee. We'll be, again, coming forward with recommendations, but that will completely change our report card for elementary through 6th grade. So there'll be some big, important changes that the board will hear more about that coming before too long. We have been notified by the New Hampshire Education Department that education freedom accounts, there's a phase-out grant for FY25. This has very little impact on us. In Goffstown, it's about $10,800, and for New Boston, it's just over $1,000, so we're not going to be losing an awful lot of money. I already spoke about the library inquiry, and that memo will be part of the minutes package for tonight. Our CTE agreement, which is career and technical education, we send our students to the Manchester School of Technology in Manchester. Our contract is up this year. So I wanted the board to know that we have notified the Manchester School District of our intent to look at other options and possibly consider a different contract, possibly a different provider, or maybe a different duration of contract. Our agreement expires this year. Typically, CTE agreements are 10 years, but they can be shorter, so we'll have more information forthcoming. House Bill 267, which is the bill that Representative Alexander submitted on our behalf. This was the bill to require and allow criminal records checks on employees on a more frequent basis. The House Education Committee voted 10-10 along party lines to essentially kill the bill. I'd like to thank Representative Alexander, who really supported this. He went and testified a number of times, tried to work with the committee. We provided a revised draft language that was actually written in collaboration with the New Hampshire Education Department, but unfortunately the committee did not support the bill. We're working on a plan right now. We have to have what are called data privacy agreements. That's something that the board might have heard before, DPAs. We're trying to work with Mr. Bourget and come up with a plan if we have a DPA that expires during a school year. I know that Mr. Cloutier is not here this evening. He and Mr. Bourget make up the technology committee. They have met and talked about this. So we're working on a plan to bring to the board, if we have a DPA that has expired, that we would plan to have that product sunset at the end of that school year. Teachers would no longer then be able to use it if we're not able to secure a new DPA. but we're working on some changes that we'll bring forth before long. I'm going to refrain from any kind of a drum roll for my next one, but it's the Conval decision.
Oh, yeah.
So if you hadn't heard, Judge Rolfe found that the current base adequacy minimum is not sufficient. It's not enough to meet the state's constitutional requirement to provide an adequate education. Boy, that sounds like something we've been saying for years around this table. I'm glad that that was the finding. The state, according to the judge, the state should instead be spending somewhere around $7,356 per student, and the judge also said that that number is likely really low still. So based on the numbers, the state would need to find somewhere around $500 million of new revenue for this state with no broad-based tax, no revenue projection to ever come anywhere close to $537 million increase. But that's where we find ourselves. Also, at that same time, there was a decision out of Rockingham County, same judge, that SWEPT, everyone remembers SWEPT. SWEPT is the statewide education property tax that, again, I have been saying for years is really a local tax because it's money that's collected locally, it's retained locally, and the state calls that state aid. Well, in this ruling, the judge found that SWEPT is unconstitutional. The tax is collected by towns, not the state, at a rate set by the state, and there is no mechanism for towns that have excess SWEPT revenue to give it to property poor towns. So the entirety of SWEPT and that construct of how we very unconstitutionally, if that's an appropriate adverb, I'll look to Mr. McDermott in the back. He gave me a thumbs up, thank you. Needless to say, there's an awful lot that's going to need to be done with respect to school funding. So I would expect the state to appeal both of these decisions. They will then go on to the state Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens. So I'm not optimistic at this point. I have seen these decisions before. The state has repeatedly lost these school funding lawsuits. Claremont 1, Claremont 2, Dover, Londonderry. There's just no shortage of them, and nothing has changed in 30 years. So maybe this time, maybe there'll be some new ideas. We'll have to see. But at this point, can you imagine, as we're sitting here talking about when Mr. Talbot shares the concerns with respect to what this town is trying to fund, imagine if the state provided us with $7,500 of adequacy per student instead of less than $4,000. That would have an incredible impact on the local school tax rate. So let's hope that at some point, hopefully shorter than the next 30 years, that in New Hampshire we'll start to see the state finally recognize that the way that we fund education has always been, and continues to be, unconstitutional. And unfortunately, the people who pay for that are at the local community level. Yeah. I'm going to skip a few of these. So April 8th, 2024, there's going to be a pretty significant eclipse happening. I wanted the board to know that a lot of school districts are talking about modifying their school calendar to give students that day off. Probably not surprisingly, I do not support this idea. I think kids need more school, not less school. I think that it could be an incredible learning opportunity, but I think that those people will go and do that anyhow. The New Hampshire Education Department is actually talking about this as well, so there's been some discussion if the state would make a requirement for that not to be a school day. So we'll see what happens, but I just wanted you to know that that's being discussed. Glen Lake School has been selected by the New Hampshire Education Department for what's called a small school review. So at this point, Mrs. Stoyle is working to submit all the required documentation. These are reviews that the state continues to do and to have oversight, but they're always a lot of work. So this is a new one for this small school review. Glen Lake has never been selected before. Maple Ave reached out to the board. I know I was copied on an email that was sent to the board asking if you were interested in participating in the spelling bee. If you're interested, please respond directly to the Maple Ave PFT, and thank you to them for reaching out to you. I wanted you to know that we've sent correspondence, Mrs. McGrath, our HR director, has, to all paraprofessionals in Goffstown. UNH is providing paraprofessionals who work a minimum of 20 hours a week in a New Hampshire elementary school, 100% tuition coverage for up to 2 early childhood classes per term, per semester. So that's a pretty significant cost savings. There are fees of about $92 that people would have to pay, and they can use their professional development line. But this is an incredible opportunity if a paraprofessional might be interested in becoming a teacher, that you can have a large portion of the courses needed covered by the state in this agreement. So we're excited about that. I wanted to let the board know that Bartlett School was briefly put in lockdown on November 28th due to a police investigation of an untimely death. At this point, we've all seen the news that's come out of that very tragic story. That was the reason. And at the time, at the request of Goffstown Police, Bartlett was put into lockdown out of an abundance of caution that was later lifted. But I wanted you to know that that happened. Mrs. Kohler sent a letter to all of our families and shared information that according to our agreement with Microsoft, the licenses that we buy at the school district allows us to offer free Microsoft 365 licenses on up to 5 home-based devices for all of our students. So this is a nice opportunity for families to be able to get the entire Office Microsoft suite on up to 5 devices at home. So Mrs. Kohler sent a letter to all families, so we wanted you to know that. And I apologize, I told you it was going to be long. I'm still going here. I was contacted by Mark Frugere. You may remember that name. Mark is a town planner, and we worked with him most recently on our demographic studies when we did the facilities committee. Mark worked with us looking at some of our school projections. Mr. Frugere has been hired by the town. I can't say if it's I believe it's the select board, it might be the planning board, but they are looking into and studying the current impact fee model in Goffstown. So I wasn't contacted by the select board or the town, so Mark reached out to us directly. I don't know what his timeline, I think he's hoping to have a report done in the springtime, but I wanted the board to be aware that impact fees are being evaluated and being reviewed, and I think it's important for us to be aware that there could be changes, and they could be significant changes based upon this, and we'll want to be informed, and we'll obviously want to have a voice as the select board and the planning board consider these pieces. Mr. Gross had reached out to our senator, Senator Murphy, looking for him to sponsor a bill that would change certain special education mailing requirements, and I'm talking snail mail. There are requirements that are required to be sent via snail mail, and Mr. Gross recommended Senator Murphy to look into this, and he submitted an LSR. I can give you the number. LSR stands for Legislative Services Request. It's 24-2815, and this would make the mailings not required if a parent opted to receive things via email, which most of our parents do now at this point. So Mr. Gross is 1 for 1 on his.
I want to give credit where credit is due. So during the budget process, mailings and special ed came up, and I sent an acknowledgement to Suzanne. But when we did that, Lisa Johnson, who's our assistant principal at Maple, had, as we went through it, I said, why can't they be emailed? And Lisa said, because the law says you can't. And sometimes an administrator says that, and other times, in this case, Lisa found the statute and the regulations, sent it to me, and then I was able to forward it to the senator. So kudos to Lisa for really initiating
This would be
that.
just another example of Mrs. Johnson being a remarkable.
Yeah, I just wanted to give credit
administrator
where credit is
who
due. It
works
wasn't
so
me.
hard.
I just passed it along, so.
Yeah. Well, but you're 1 for 1. You're 1 for 1. So we'll see if Scott can improve to 2-0 on this one. So I wanted you to know that Chief Murray, our fire chief, has submitted a FEMA hazard mitigation grant application on our behalf. This is a very significant grant for us. This is a 75-25 match for a generator project here at Goffstown High School. The board will recall, we were eligible for this same grant many years ago that unfortunately the town submitted a separate project and we missed the 75-25. Usually, for hazard mitigation grants, the school district is only entitled to a 50% reimbursement. This one being 75, if this project is approved, is a big deal for us. So at this point, we would be responsible for 25% of the cost of the project, but that would also allow us to do in-kind services and donations. So for example, hypothetically, if the town of Goffstown was able to do a little bit of site work and maybe bring in some equipment and donate some materials, all of that could apply to our 25%. At this point, we are moving forward with the grant. We have no idea whether we're going to be selected or we would be eligible. So at this point, I would continue to have us push forward. Our total potential exposure would be around $116,000 on this project. And if we were selected for the grant project, I would recommend that we fund said project using the 5% contingency fund. So more to come on that. I have some good news. Bigger than, well, maybe not bigger than the Conville one, but we have a teacher rep who's going to come join us. So I'm very excited. Christine Bean, who I think many of the board members know, she's a great math teacher here at Goffstown High School. She has agreed to come and be one of our 3 teacher rep positions. So she will be seated at this table at your next meeting. So be ready to welcome a teacher back to the board. And my last piece, I apologize again for a very long superintendent's report this evening. We neglected to include on our agenda this evening the New Hampshire Immunization Registry. This was a project that we talked about at your last meeting. There was some additional information that board members had asked about. We sent out some information to everybody. So at this point, we didn't have it on the agenda. We could talk about it now, or we'd be happy to put it on your next agenda if that would be the board's pleasure. Given that it's 8:30 and we still have a presentation, that would likely be my recommendation.
Let's put it on till next.
Okay.
Everybody good with that?
And I would stop there and ask if there are any questions that I can answer. Mrs. Kohler, Mr. Gross.
Go ahead, Jared.
The M365 licensing is, I know that email was sent out or the notification was sent out. Is that on our SAU 19 website for people to look at as well? And the process to go through to do that?
That's a great question. I can definitely speak with Mr. Bourget about getting it up on our website for parents as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Jared. Anyone else? Go ahead, Shane.
On the CTE agreements that you're considering with Manchester, what other centers are we considering at this point?
Mr. Gross, would you like to, actually, Mr. McDermott is here. At the risk of dragging him up, Mr. McDermott, why don't you come up for a second and you can speak about this. We are looking at Concord.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, we've also had students who have attended Alvern, Alvern High School. And I want to be really clear that we're just really looking at options at this point. This is not any kind of a statement about our dissatisfaction with Manchester School of Technology. They have many wonderful programs. Mr. McDermott.
Yeah, I met with the principal up there, just exploring options. We're going up tomorrow to discuss what some possibilities would be. So right now I'm just trying to make decisions that make the most sense for our kids.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? All right, so we're moving on. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, there is no old business, so the new business is our data assessment presentation. So come on up.
Why don't we actually have Ms. Pishka and Mrs. Coburn both come up, since they'll be presenting back to back.
And it's our
If you
little
wouldn't mind just
packet.
letting me open this up a little bit.
Yeah.
So at our November CNE meeting, we did a comprehensive data presentation that not only includes the information that you're seeing this evening, but a lot more depth in talking about some of our local assessment data as well. So what we've done is taken some of the highlights and information that we think is really important for not only the board to hear, but for families at home watching as well, that's specific to our New Hampshire SAS data from last year. So at this point, why don't I turn it over to Suzanne, and she can present for Maple Avenue.
Sure. And I will make this brief, I promise. So Ginny mentioned the highlights, so I will start with the first two slides. They highlight our state testing. We continue to meet the state average or exceed it in all of our grades 3 and 4. And so these are our math results from the spring of 2023, and then the next slide is our English language arts results. So if you go on to the next one, historically, we have been sliding, and when we discussed our data, putting it together for the presentation for C&E, one of the things we talked a lot about is something that we haven't done in the last few years that really made a difference back in, well, before 2019, which was focusing on ways to convey to students and staff the importance of testing, not just those who are directly participating, but making it a whole school community event. And we've talked about even bringing in parents and asking them to help us convey to their students how important it is for them, and including, we would like to develop a system for motivating and incentivizing students to do their best. So right now, our school leadership committee has broken out into a subcommittee. We're calling ourselves the test motivation team, and we're going to be working on that too, because we do know that we all do better when we're encouraged, right? When we see that there might be something here for us too. And with high stakes testing, I think that's really important for our students. So I think we will see a shift, at least with those students who scored that partially proficient, the 2s, we could swing to the 3s, maybe some of the 3s to the 4s. So that's our hope. So that was something we talked about at that that meeting. And then same with the NWEA results. One thing I would say that in 2019, that is very high, that percentage, but that at that time, that included our low average. So I looked back, that included our low average. The scores in 21, 22, and 23 were just our average and above. So it's much lower, but I would think if I would have added in the low average, those scores would be higher than in the 60s and the 50s. So what are we doing? What do we do for all of our students? We are monitoring them to see what kinds of supports they need. We have a robust Tier 1, what we call Tier 1, which is for every student. Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, called multi-tiered systems of support. That is not only for academic, but for behavior, because as we know, if students aren't ready to learn, then learning doesn't happen. So we are supporting them behaviorally and academically. This just lists some of the things that we offer. IXL being an electronic version of practice for students. And we've been, like I said, progress monitoring with NWEA testing, and for grades 1, 2, and 3, something called Acadience, which is a screening for literacy, reading specifically. If you want to go to the next slide, Wendy. So what are we doing for Tier 2 and 3? This basically is showing in literacy how many students we're supporting currently, and that's grown a little bit in grade 1, just from the Acadience testing that we've been required to do. But we are basically supporting 164 students across the grades in literacy and about 65 in math. And then, again, just talking about tier 2 and 3, we progress monitor. We're looking to make sure that we're consulting with the other service providers like occupational therapists, our speech pathologists, and guidance. We are providing training to our teachers in specialized literacy and math programs, and we've listed a few there, and that would be for the long term. I mean, we improve our teaching techniques and best practices, and that improves learning. So that, let's see, did I miss anything? Nope, that pretty much covers it.
Shane, go ahead.
Thank you. On one of the last slides, when you say you're supporting X amount of students, is that like through meeting with interventionists and things like that, or does that look different?
So
Depending on
the
the
slide
kid.
where it had the number of students that receive additional support, that is through an interventionist.
Okay.
And amazingly, we have 4.
Wow.
Yeah, and that, but we've been able to maximize support by pushing into our first grade classrooms. So we have 7 first grade classrooms. So we have 4 interventionists, and we have recruited some of our special ed teachers to also push in and provide support 1 hour every day to our below and near grade level students. So they're getting a double dose every day of literacy. Their classroom teacher is taking them in small group, and then the interventionist is.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Go ahead, Nicole.
Excuse me. I'm looking at the SAS data, and it looks like between last year and this year, the 3rd grade's actually doing all right. They've seen some increases, but 4th grade in both math and language arts has seen a pretty significant decrease. So I'm wondering if you have any insight there as to why 4th grade in particular.
Well, I mean, I think that this particular year, I don't want to blame it all on high numbers, but I would say that, having a larger group of students in classrooms means you're dividing one teacher amongst more students, and that does require quite a bit of talent to meet everybody's needs when we need to. But I would also say that that group is a group that did have some interruption in their learning in the last few years as well. So, but our hope is, like I said, we dropped that whole motivational part in the last few years, and it was like an aha when we were doing this presentation, thinking, why aren't we doing this? We should be focusing on making sure that they see us as their cheerleaders, because that went a long way when we did it the first time. I mean, every school has that same motivation. I think Mountain View and the high school could speak to what they offer when students do well on the SATs or on their SAS testing. So we know it motivates them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yes, for the students who receive additional support, I'll be using generic terms, additional support based on their scores, do we have any statistical data that shows or demonstrates that support has resulted in improved scores for those specific children?
So are you talking about for this, what we're talking about, the
In the last
support that
couple
we're
of
receiving
years,
right
is
now?
there any data that shows that I want to call it intervention, the additional support, results in improvement?
Yeah, I would say that there are some students that we could look over time that, well, actually, if you looked at how many students in first grade on that list, it's 40-something. And then when you get to second grade, it's 20-something. So what you could say is that typically, we are higher in first grade. Those students start to understand the system of reading, and then they are back into the regular education only and not providing support. Then there's that other group, Ellen, as you know, that we gather more information and realize that they need more specialized support. And then they might go into a tier 3 type of
It's just that when we talk about we're spending money on the resources to be able to provide it, I know probably all of us would like to know and see statistically that there's a reward for that. There's an improvement being seen from those services. So.
Well, I think we know that a child who is having a double dose of reading every day, an hour of their teacher's time and a specialist's time, that's a gift,
Yeah.
right?
Ellen, I think it's also important to mention, the data that you're seeing is more of our high-stakes test data that we're showing you. But the classroom teachers and interventionists are seeing our program assessments, our IXL assessments. They're looking at IEP goals to make sure that students are making progress. So I just want to be sure that the community at home and the board knows that we're looking at more data points rather than just these high-stake tests.
Thank you, Wendy. Anyone else have a question, a comment before we move on to Bartlett? No, I guess not.
Great.
All right.
And Ms. Coburn, the assistant principal, is here on behalf of Bartlett this evening.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. So this first slide just shows the breakdown of our 2023 ELA SAS distribution, below proficient through highly proficient for grades 3 and 4, 3 on the left, 4 on the right. And this is our state comparison for ELA for SAS. Grade 3, we're right on the New Hampshire state average at 46%, and grade 4 just, these are students with scores of proficient, sorry. Grade 4 was just a bit under that New Hampshire state average for SAS ELA. This slide compares ELA proficiency for Goffstown. That includes both Maple and Bartlett compared to the state average. The New Hampshire state average is that lighter blue section, and Goffstown is gray. And again, that's Bartlett and Maple. So grade 3 on the left, we're just a bit above that New Hampshire average. There are also schools that we were compared to. Merrimack is green, Ware is the darker blue. Then we have Amherst in that yellowish color, Bedford orange, and Wyndham the other blue, similar blues. And grade 4 is on the right, that same information, same color coding. So we're just a bit below the New Hampshire average, Goffstown, for grade 4. This is our math distribution, going from below proficient to highly proficient, grade 3 on the left, grade 4 on the right. These are students who, So that's the breakdown for that. And then compared to the state average in math, grade 3, we're just slightly above for those percentage of students with a proficient score. And grade 4 a bit lower for students with the score of proficient. And the next slide has that same breakdown, but this time for mathematics for both Maple and Bartlett compared to the New Hampshire average and surrounding schools.
The board will notice that when we get to Mountain View in the high school, we did a comparison of those same districts so that you're going to be able to see that comparison over time.
Our SAS historical data, that top table is all students who are proficient and above over the years 2019, 21, 22, and 23. And the table below is students with IEPs who were proficient and above over those same years in both math and ELA for grades 3 and 4. Our NEWA historical data, all students proficient and above on the left for grades 2, 3, and 4 math, and grades 2, 3, and 4 ELA. And on the right are students with IEPs who are proficient or above for 2023 in those same areas, those same grades. So what are we doing to meet the needs of all learners in the long term? There's a lot of points there. We have Title I and intervention push-in support for small groups, literacy in grades 1 and 2, and also for whole class writing. Pull out small group instruction for ELA in grades 3 and 4, and pull out small group instruction for math grades 1 through 4. We have professional development for all educators and literacy development, data analysis, instructional resources, professional development for all professional staff in the Math and U curriculum, and then those progress checks using the NEWA benchmarks and SAS to kind of see where students are. And we also have the, Suzanne spoke about the MTSS academic piece and also the MTSS behavioral piece, and we use data points to see which students need support in those areas. And then, oh, that was short term, I believe I said that. How are we supporting learners in the long term? Implementation of Math and U curriculum. They're in development of Bartlett Math Professional Learning Community. Again, professional development for all educators in math and reading instruction. And then the Letters program, which is a 2-year PD program that is offered for free through the New Hampshire Department of Ed. And we have one administrator, Jerry, who's in year 2, 6 professional staff are in year 2, and 2 professional staff are in year 1 of that letters training. We are meeting the needs of our tier 2 and tier 3 learners in literacy and math. Those tables just show, how many students we're supporting regular ed and students with IEPs in each of those areas for grades 1 and 2. And then again for grades 3 and 4.
Anybody have any questions for Bartlett? Go ahead.
It looks like you're doing a lot, but that Bartlett could use some significant intervention in a decent amount of areas. And I know Bartlett had requested some more interventionist time in this year's budget, which was not granted. So my question is, what sort of impact do you think it would have to be able to have that additional staff member as an interventionist at the school?
Well, I think the biggest, it would be, I feel like, and again, this is, I feel like that the grades 3, 4 group, I feel like 1 and 2 have a lot of support with that push-in for whole class, which is extremely beneficial. If something like that were to happen, if there were an additional interventionist, I would hope that they could really focus on grades 3 and 4 at that point.
I noticed a similar trend with the 4th grade. I forget if it was math or LA, but going down more so than the other grades at Bartlett as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. Go ahead, Ellen.
Just to piggyback on that, it looks like there's a problem in 4th grade, particularly in math. How are we can't just let that go.
Right.
Those kids apparently need something more or different. And what are we doing about that?
Christine, if I may, so we have a new math program, as the board is aware, Math and U, that we've started this year. We did recognize that we were missing some of the rigor that was a part of our former program, which is part of the reason why we made a change. We anticipate that, of course, there's going to be a few bumps in the road. When you're adding a program and your 4th graders, as an example, have had a different program for 3 years, there's different vocabulary, there's different pieces that were a part of it. So this year, our teachers have done a tremendous amount of professional development surrounding math, not only in onboarding the program, but through their curriculum and staff meetings to really make sure that we're honing in on what our students need across the board, not just in 4th grade. But we certainly did recognize that there were some gaps in our former program. And I do want to mention, getting a new program is not going to solve everything.
I don't want to misconstrue that to the public. But I think this is a significant start in getting our students a little bit more rigor, using math vocabulary at a younger age to get them ready for some of these high-stake tests that we're seeing.
Just a quick
Yeah,
follow-up.
gosh, Nicole.
I mentioned this before when it was presented as part of the budget, and I don't even know if we can change that at this point, but I just feel like we're seeing a giant need at Bartlett for intervention. So I'm concerned that we're not granting them an interventionist that they're asking for in the budget.
Thank you, Nicole. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to invite both of our curriculum coordinators, Mr. Lewis and Mr. McDermott, up for their presentations for Mountain View and for the high school. You'll notice when we do get to the high school presentation, Kurt is going to talk a little bit more than just about SAT scores. There's some other data points that I think are really important for the board to see and for the public as well. Okay, so we'll start with Josh.
All right.
Thank you very much. If you can't hear me because I'm wearing a mask, I do apologize. Everyone in my house is sick, and so I'm trying to keep that to myself. So what you see on the screen now is our summative ELA SAS scores for grades 5 through 8. You'll notice that these are showing grades from below proficient through highly proficient. So looking at this slide, here is our MVMS ELA SAS state compare, or this is the proficiency in terms of students that are proficient compared to the state. In grades 5 through 8, you'll see that we are above, even just slightly above state average for all grades in ELA. This slide shows that comparison between other school districts as well. Mountain View is in the gray on each of those different grade levels. And you can see that we use the same exact school districts that were used at the elementary level as well. So here's our summative math scores of, again, grades 5 through 8, from below proficient to highly proficient. And then here is that state comparison versus our averages as well. So we are above average in all grades except for grade 7. We were at state average as well for proficiency in math. Same school districts once again that you can see. MVMS is in the gray. And we are basically kind of at or above the pack, in the middle to above the pack. So here's our science SAS scores. Science SAS testing takes place in grades 5, 8, and 11. So here are grades 5 and 8 from below proficient through highly proficient. You will notice that if you look at grade 8, we have a significant drop in our highly proficient. That is one thing I did want to make sure to draw attention to. All of our other scores that we've had have been at or above the state average, and this is the one that has dipped down below the state average, which you'll see on the next slide. So here you can see we've dipped down below the state average by a couple of percentage points in grade 8, and we are well above in grade 5. So here again, same different towns that we were compared against. Once again, for grade 5, we're kind of the upper middle of the pack. And then for grade 8, we are kind of right in the middle to lower middle of the pack.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Do we know why?
So I'm happy to talk about that now.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But so we have, there's some speculation as to different reasons as to why that we have such a significant drop in 8th grade. We've had some turnover in staff. We've also had a program that we've used, Savvis, that has had an online component that is continually not functioning properly. And that's not an issue on our end. That's on the vendor end. So our teachers have had some issues getting our students accessing the curriculum in school on the online version of things, which has caused some problems. Another part of this too is that we want to look into the scope and sequence of our program that we use, our curriculum that we teach our 8th graders, because when SAS testing comes around in the spring, there's a possibility that we simply haven't covered that content yet. So if we haven't covered it and they're getting tested on it, they're not necessarily going to perform as well as they would have done otherwise if they haven't been exposed to it. So we want to look at that scope and sequence of our curriculum and compare it to what the test is looking for. So that way we can kind of have a better idea of gauging what we need to cover earlier in the school year versus later in the school year. Another piece to this too is that we have, kind of similar to what was mentioned over at Bartlett, where there was kind of this, or at the elementary schools, where there was a lack of buy-in from students. SAS became one of those things where it became kind of old hat. It's something we do every year. It's something the kids are familiar with, something they know they need to do. And I think that we can all do a better job of kind of purposefully kind of positively promoting it and getting the kids engaged and excited to do it. So that's one of the initiatives that we're going to try to take with this year, which is using our PBIS initiative, Positive Behaviors, Interventions, and Supports, to do some rollouts around SAS testing, to create some incentives and things like that to kind of help promote the positive side of things and get kids more interested and also kind of more focused on doing the best they can on this test. Did that answer your question, Ellen?
Well, it's just discouraging to see.
Understood.
Because I'm sure we're always looking to see if we align what we're teaching and what we're testing, and it just means that our kids are not getting what they need, it seems to me, if these are the scores. Regardless of the reasoning, I don't like to see that on their part, that
Ellen,
they're lower.
I'd also mention that in our classrooms, we do a lot of hands-on, inquiry-based laboratories with our kids. And when you get to New Hampshire SAS, it is not hands-on. That lab is on the computer. So we, as a group, we actually have an assessment committee that meets monthly right now, and as we get closer to testing time, we meet every other week to talk about what we're doing in all of our buildings, and there's representation from all of our buildings in that meeting, is how do we make it so that we're giving students that online experience, because we have noticed that that has been a problem. We're doing a lot hands-on, but how do we get them on a computer? One of the things that we're looking at is there is an open source online program called Open Science. I know Mr. Talbot has talked about looking at open source materials before. That's actually been looked at by Ed Reports, that has all green check marks, which is a really good thing that we are going to look at because it is free, it's online, and they do have some online components that I think would help us to supplement what we're currently using. So actually, I'm meeting with Mr. Lewis and the science department at Mountain View this Thursday, and we're gonna start taking a look at that. Is this something that we need to look at? We've also talked about the state offers some modulars that you can go on and practice with as a classroom. We're going to talk about making sure that all of our staff members are using those modulars. Let's get students familiar with what the test looked like, what those questions look like, have them have classroom discussions so that we're preparing them better for that test. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a quick kind of statement, actually. And I think it's fair to say, too, that this data from these high-stakes, standardized type tests is really only one measure of student learning also, because it's often so different from what they're doing in the classroom every day. And in my experience, as students get older as well, they tend to buy in less to these tests, meaning they don't put as much effort in. So I've always hated these tests, and I know they're necessary, but I think the data needs to be taken in that context, in that it's a small piece of what's actually happening with student learning. So,
Very true.
Shane, I agree with you. As a former middle school principal, I called it 8th grade itis. So it's all of those tests that you're getting, and when you're thinking about it at Mountain View, you've got your Washington DC trip, and you've got promotion, all within that window of when you're testing. So for some of our students, as Josh was talking about, getting that buy-in is how do we motivate those 8th graders during that time stamp when they know we're ready for high school? How do we get them excited? So I'm glad that the middle school is looking at that, because I think looking at rewards, incentivizing, and it is, a balancing act, because of course we want the students to take it seriously, but we also don't want to add so much stress and anxiety on our students that they're going in there and they're nervous and are unable to test. So it really is a balancing act that our teachers are having in the classroom.
And we don't want to teach the tests.
Of course not.
As a former
bad-
eighth
it's a bad
grader,
practice.
I agree with you. As a senior in high school, I agree with you.
All right, go ahead and finish up.
Okay, so before I start talking about the info on this slide, if you could all just do one favor under the all students proficient or above 2023 column for ELA. Those numbers are wrong. I did not catch it on the second or third time I reviewed this. I caught it today when I was reviewing it. Those numbers are actually for fifth grade ELA is 64%, for sixth grade is 59%, for seventh grade is 55%, and for eighth grade is 59%. So again, that's the 2023 column for ELA. But otherwise now what you're looking at is the proficiency or above for all students on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is for students with IEPs that are proficient or above, and that is percentage of students at proficiency or above over the last 4 years. So here's our NEWA testing. So some historical data. Again, on the left-hand side, you have all students proficient or above for the last 4 years, and then on the right-hand side, you have this year of this past testing this fall for students with IEPs proficient or above. And generally speaking, for our NEWA scores, our percentages are pretty high for kids that are proficient or above. Also up here now is our advanced math enrollment numbers by grade for the last 5 years, or 4 years, 5 years. You'll notice that the numbers, generally speaking, remain relatively the same, but there are different spikes in different areas where it kind of drops in other spots. Reasoning for that could be any number of things. We've had some turnover in math teachers, so that could drive people's choices. We also have teachers are trying to be very purposeful on how they make recommendations for students taking advanced math. And we've been kind of pulling in the reins on that a little bit too. It also is driven by student choice, and parent choices as well. But generally speaking, our advanced math numbers are fairly high.
This is a reminder, for geometry, those are eighth graders that are taking a sophomore level class. So I just wanted to make sure that people know that.
And so here's basically a whole bunch of information about the different things that we've been doing to try to help support these kids, both short-term and long-term. So for meeting the needs of learners scoring low on NEWA or below proficiency on SAS, we have, and for our short-term, we've looked at MTSA and MTSSB protocols. We've created a homework den. We have Title I supports and reading specialists and interventionists. Plus we have a literacy class. We have teacher support. For in-class small groups and ELA math and science instruction to differentiate in small groups. IXL is another great way for teachers to be able to have like a diagnostic for kids and see where they're at and their skill levels. Tutor.com is also something that's available for New Hampshire for all students, grades 6 through 12. So definitely something that's worth looking into for families that are looking for another opportunity to support their kids at home. And then we've also done some of our own PBIS initiatives and incentives around testing, and we're going to roll those out again this year. Long-term PD for all general ed staff and special ed staff in math, reading, and science instruction and differentiated instruction. We're looking at district-wide elementary math programming, vertical alignment between buildings. In fact, the high school and the middle school have been working quite a bit this year so far in vertical alignment in different areas. We have a new teacher mentoring program, and then of course our curriculum meetings and PLCs are basically our big go-to for things to try to help long-term address these problems and issues.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions, comments for the middle school? All right, seeing none, thank you so much. All right, high school.
Yeah, I just want to say how incredibly proud I am of our teachers. Been a teacher for 15 years. Seeing it from this side, we consistently punch above our weight. So, for instance, we're ranked 12th according to the U.S. News and World Report in New Hampshire out of 85 schools for those different criteria. Basically, the U.S. News and World Report looks at what they think students should be doing, and then they compare it to what we're doing, and we consistently perform better than their linear regression. This is our AP exams participation and pass rate for the past 5 years. We have our highest pass rate this year in 4 years. And it's one of the reasons that we were awarded AP Honor Roll status this year. I'll let you look over some of that stuff, but average scores over 4 in AP Calculus, BC, and World History. Our Physics 2 class had 100% pass rate, and just so you're all familiar, AP tests are ranked 1 through 5. Anything 3 or above is a passing score. So we have some phenomenal teachers and phenomenal records. These are our evidence-based reading and writing scores for the past 5 years on the SAT. You can see a general downward trend, but that's a statewide trend. We've maintained our disparity with the state all 5 years. The 2020 doesn't have testing data. And these are our specific IEP and students with disabilities populations. These are the percentage of students who have reached the evidence-based reading and writing benchmarks, and again, you can see that trend and that disparity continuing. And our IEP and students with disabilities populations for benchmarks. This is our district comparison. When put up against all other schools in New Hampshire, that's where we stand. We are 22nd out of 98. And those are our closest competitors. I apologize for the text, the font size, but consistently for a school of our size, we are doing very well. Our math scores, you can see the closest that we ever got to the state was in 2022, but we have pulled pretty far ahead. And IEP and students with disabilities populations. And those are our benchmarks. And the state data here is reported as less than 10%, so we don't know the exact number. It's our district comparison statewide. We're 23rd out of 98. And those are our nearest competitors. This is our SAS science benchmark scores for the previous 3 years. You can see that same consistent gap between us and the state. And IEP populations, grade 11 benchmark for science. That's a fairly complex slide that basically gives you the specific numbers for the previous slides that you just saw. And that is our district comparison to all schools in the state. We're ranked 13 out of 93 high schools in the state for science. And those are our nearest in our class. This is what happens to our students once they graduate. 4-year school last year, 59% of our students went, 19% went to a 2-year. We had 3 students in military service. And our student supports, I won't read to you, but essentially we have a homework den that meets in the library every day except for Friday. Grizzly Den right there, where students can get support all day. Student Resource Center, drop-in tutoring. National Honor Society tutors, which this year and last year has been really phenomenal. We have students working with their peers in classrooms to tutor them as needed, and it's been very successful. Media Center, staffed by a certified teacher all periods, all days, and we also have supported preps that we're able to offer specific services to students as they need them.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions, comments for the high school? All right, I see none. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Heather, if I could just add
Yeah.
just 2 more points.
Absolutely.
One of the things I also wanted to let the board know, and we have talked about it at C&E as well, is this year for our state assessment in the spring, there is a different window for the writing portion of SAS. Normally, all of the writing portions are scored by AI, and the AI hasn't been updated since 2016. So this year, they've made a 2-week window where all students will take the writing portion in March, and it will be hand scored this year. The reason that they're hand scoring is they are going to be training AI to be able to move forward with AI scoring next year. The reason I mention that is it is a lot earlier than we tend to do our writing assessment. We normally do that more towards the end of April, and the window starts March 4th. Also, in the middle of that window, we do have a day off from school because of elections. So the schools have already come up with plans to be able to make sure we have enough devices readily available. Our IT department has everything ready to go because the window is incredibly short for that writing piece. We went to a training, actually Mr. McDermott, Mr. Lewis and I, and the state was very stern in the fact that you cannot ask for an extension beyond that window. So if we happen to have a snow day or something like that, we have a whole bunch of contingency plans because we have to make sure we get that writing done. I'd also like to mention, and I know that the board knows this, on our website, we have a document on there that talks about all of our achievement data. So for those at home, if you go under the curriculum tab on our home website and look under achievement and performance, we have an achievement document that, because we just did our 2023 data, will now be updated with everything we talked about tonight. But that document really does give more information other than just the achievement data that we talked about this evening. It talks about the district vision and mission. It talks about cost per pupil. So for those voters at home, for parents at home who are looking for more information, that is a great document for people at home to go to. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody else have any other comments, questions before we say goodnight to them? No? Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate all this. Have a good evening.
Thank you. For bringing your appetite.
All right, so we're moving on to the first reads. There's only 3. 2 are required by law, and 1 was just a date request. So you guys can read through them. They'll come back next time for any questions or answers. All right, draft 2024-25 school calendar already.
Already. So we don't need to take any action this evening on the calendar. I wanted to give you your first opportunity to see the calendar, to kind of take it in. We will present this to New Boston on Wednesday night, and we would think probably later in December or in January would be when we would adopt the calendar, so we have time. A couple of highlights that I would share with you. You'll see that the calendar is again 181 school days. I do want to just remind the board that we have a required calendar either by hours or by school days. Our calendar is 1 day longer than the required minimum by the state, so it's 181 days. This particular calendar has 2 teacher workshop days at the end of August and has students starting school the first day on Tuesday, September 3rd, so after Labor Day. You'll notice the very next week in September on Tuesday, September 10th is a teacher workshop day. That's because that is the primary. So we will have a primary in the fall, next fall. That would be for gubernatorial, that would be for other state positions. And then we will have the general election on the Tuesday, November 5th. So that's the second election. And then the third election will be on the March 11th. This calendar keeps Columbus Day on Monday the 14th in October. This keeps Martin Luther King Day, Civil Rights Day on Monday the 20th. For Thanksgiving, we continue to have school the day before Thanksgiving with an early release. I will share with the board that we are one of the few school districts that is in session on that day. A lot of schools have that day off. I would recommend that we continue to have school. That would also be the recommendation of the majority of our school administrators. I did pull the attendance and looked at it. We had somewhere around 20% as high not attending that day, but for the rest of the students and staff, they were here. Christmas vacation, you'll see in December, we did an early release day on Friday the 20th. Some schools are starting to have, they're having that Monday before Christmas as a school day. That felt like not a great day to have school to me. So I thought that we would have that entire week off. And February vacation, you see, March is the local elections on the 11th. April vacation is late this year. It goes into the first week of May, and this would have us with our last day of school without any traditional snow days on June 19th. So that's a high-level overview.
Go ahead. Do you have, you look like you have something to
Just because
say.
you're gonna- Well, I guess I have to say something now. No, just looking at this, Brian, looks like you have the general election is a distance learning day versus
Correct.
the other two elections you're having off. What's kind of your thought on why we're doing one versus the other on those?
Yeah, so it's also balancing teacher workshop days. So we only have, we have 5 teacher workshop days that we have to do, and we have to get into the calendar somewhere. So I couldn't in any way do a distance learning day on September 10th. It's too soon. School has just started. The add drop period at the high school is still ongoing, so course rosters aren't even complete yet. That day was too soon. So I could do a distance learning day on March 11th, and then that would have me with one teacher workshop day that I would probably put after students got out of school.
The reason why I mentioned it, just looking at the 19th as the last day of school, knowing that there might be a delay or early releases, delays, actual snow days versus distance learning days that occur, looks a little late to me. That might just be me.
It is a little late. So we talked about all of these things, and let me tell you a couple of options that we could do. According to the Goffstown teacher contract, we are permitted to have teachers start back the last 3 business days of August. So I could make Friday the 30th a school day. That would push it back one day. Again, I didn't think that having one day before Labor Day weekend seemed like a real great idea to me. I definitely could do a distance learning day on March 11th. That would just mean then that I have a teacher workshop day after students get out of school. But apart from that, the years that we have the 3 election dates, that's really the challenge here. Other options, not having Columbus Day, that could be a school day, that would bring it back one day. Same thing with Martin Luther King Day, that could be a school day.
How flexible is it to say, we're gonna plan that as a teacher workshop, but bump it to a distance learning if we have a lot of snow days that winter? In March, March 11th.
We could.
Tentative, have it off and have your teacher workshop, push it to the end of the year if we end up with a bunch of snow days.
It's an option.
All right, so I guess we should think on this. When you want this decided back in January, February?
Yeah, so we don't have to submit the calendar to the state until the beginning of April. So, typically we would, January, February, we would want to have the calendar. I like to bring it to you soon because people are asking.
Yeah.
People are trying to book vacations.
Right.
Sometimes I get calls and they say, if you were, what week do you think February vacation might be? Because people are trying to book things, so.
Absolutely.
Does this also correspond with, because I know that our current contract with Manchester is expiring. Does this correspond with any of their weeks off?
So it aligns pretty closely with Manchester. So according to the state law, we're allowed to have 10 days that are different with a CTE center. So we would be considerably less than that. Manchester's calendar, when I talked about that December, the week after, so it would be I guess the 23rd of December, Manchester has school that day, that Monday. Again, I didn't think that would be a terribly productive school day. So that was one difference in their calendar, but apart from that, the calendar aligns pretty closely.
Anyone else? All right, so this will be coming back to us. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, field trip request.
So we have a request from the high school performing arts department. They don't have a date certain, but they're looking at options and they want to go to the Boston Opera House and go see a Broadway performance in late January or early February. This is something that they have done in the past, but because it's an out-of-state trip, I bring it to you, asking for your permission to allow the high school to do an out-of-state field trip for the performing arts department to go see a Broadway performance in Boston.
All right, anybody have any questions or want to make a motion? Go ahead,
I
Ellen.
move approval of the field trip request to Boston.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, staffing.
So for staffing, few notifications just for your information. We have a leave of absence from Bartlett. We have a long-term substitute, and we have a few track changes. So we'll be sure to congratulate those employees. For your approval, probably makes sense to do these
Individual.
by groups.
Yeah.
So the first one would be a teacher resignation of Josh Gagney from Bartlett Elementary School.
Move to accept the teacher resignation.
Thank you, Ellen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Go ahead.
For nominations, so we're very, first of all, this would be my chance to say thank you to Barbara French, who is a retired teacher and continues to do great work for us. So thank you, Mrs. French. Thank you, Mr. French, for continuing to share. Mrs. French, we appreciate you. We have here middle school special education teacher. This was the vacancy that we still had. So this was our last full-time vacancy that we had. So we have 2 nominations for the middle school.
I'll need a motion for the nominations.
Move to approve shall we approve all 3 nominations?
Yeah.
Move to approve all 3 nominations.
Thank you. Ellen, do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. All right.
And the last group are co-curriculars. These are all athletics, I believe. Yep, these are all athletics. So these are all your winter seasons. Please don't make me read the list.
We need a motion?
Yes,
Move
please.
to approve the co-curricular nominations as presented.
All right.
Second.
Second by Caroline. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you. And then the next.
Yeah, the last piece is we have a need for a student at Mountain View Middle School, student with an IEP, who requires the services of a registered behavior technician for one-to-one support. This service has been fulfilled through a contracted service provider, and at this point, we're looking to move away from the contracted service provider, and we would like to convert one paraprofessional position into a full-time registered behavior technician position. These would be in the grouping of what we call student support services. So this would be in the grouping of other non-unionized positions. So this includes like our IT positions and a few of those other ones. This actually will be a bit of a cost savings for us. So instead of having an RBT at a contracted rate of about over $60,000, this position would be a little cheaper if we did it as an employee. So at this point, we have continued to struggle filling this position, but we believe that we have the ability to hire someone. So that's what we're trying to do. So really, this one is cost neutral. It's instead of being a contracted services line, this would go into the employee line.
Shane, go ahead.
So the paraprofessional position is currently unfilled?
Right.
Okay.
So we have.
So it wouldn't have an impact on
Yeah,
it.
so it's not going to impact anything at this point. We're going to take this unfilled position, and this is what we're going to do. But because this is a change, we would bring it to your, for your
We need a
approval this
motion.
evening.
Right. Anybody have any questions or comments? I'll need a motion. Go ahead, Ellen.
Move to approve the paraprofessional position as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
By Caroline. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, we're unanimous. Thank you. All right, so other business that may legally come before the meeting? Go ahead,
I
Scott.
had just two. There is a proposed development at the corner of Route 114 and 114A. I did notify the chair, vice chair, and Jared as he's gone to these planning board meetings. This was a planned townhouse development that was long on the books, but has now been kind of resurrected. So I sent you, the plans are at the SAU, they're in Denise's office, if you want to see the big plans for them.
Do you remember how many units,
I
Scott?
think it was over 20. It would affect the Bartlett Elementary School area predominantly. So there was, quote-unquote, no school comment on the original plan. So if you want a comment to be made, please consider that for the December 19th meeting. Maybe we can put it back on the agenda, and then we can craft a letter to the planning board, just letting them know that what the condition or the enrollment of our schools, shall we say. So.
Hang on one second, Scott. Ellen, go ahead.
How many bedroom units?
How many bedroom units? Do you know?
2 and 3. I hold on. I'd have to.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd have to look
That's
it up. I
kids.
didn't. They came in late on Friday. I picked it up, and then they sent me the PDFs today. So.
And they would go to Bartlett?
I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
over
it goes
there.
to Bartlett. Yeah.
If you're on 114 at the stoplight and you turn left, it's right there on the right hand side.
It's near Danish Park.
So it's on the Bartlett
I
side.
can't even read
Right
it.
there.
Let's see.
It's a terrible
Yeah,
location.
and the bus stop is right on 114A. right in
Another
front.
one.
You can
Can't make this
resurrect
up.
your letters.
Yeah.
Don't think it helped last time, but
Yeah, I can't. This is too tiny for me to read. I'll email you.
Keep
It's
us updated.
townhouses.
What was the second thing you had?
What was it? Forget it. I had a brain cramp. So. That was it.
That would be bus. Transportation.
All right, while you're thinking, next school board meeting, we are gonna be going into non-public to do evaluations. I have only received 4, so if you guys could email me those this week, I will type it up. And we'll go through it in non-public at that time like we do every year. So just be prepared. I know you have PNC, so if you can get them to me, that would be great. Did you remember?
I did.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
So, I just want to let everybody know that we continue to experience bus driver challenges. Most recently, we only have a couple of drivers who take our students to co-curriculars and athletic events. And for the last 2 years, we've been unable to provide transportation for Mountain View co-curriculars and athletics, to which there are a lot of parents who are upset about that. I've been working with the truck center, STA, and we've distributed a flyer amongst our school personnel, our coaches, and our co-curricular folks that STA will help in the cost in terms of the training some of our staff. They would potentially work for STA, but if there are assistant coaches, et cetera, who are interested in driving a school bus, then they would have the opportunity to get paid through STA and also serve as a coach or volunteer coach, et cetera. So Mr. Hoft, our athletic director, and Mr. DeRocher have passed it out at the high school, and the same thing applied at the middle school with Jess Milligan to see. We're trying to do our best. I just want the community to know.
Scott, has there been any interest?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, there are some coaches, and I haven't gotten permission to release
No,
like
no,
who
no.
wants to do it, but
But
there
just-
have been
there
some
might
people
be
that
some
are
interest.
interested, and SDA pays, I think it's $15 during the training aspect of it, and then they get paid the hourly wage to be a bus driver is going to be between $22 to $25 an hour. And if you are a coach or if you're an advisor, if that bus is scheduled to stay and remain at a particular school, let's say you're going out to Portsmouth, and you're going out there for a basketball game, you get paid to drive to Portsmouth, and that driver also gets paid to stay there while the bus is there, and then when they come back. So for the coach, this is also a way to help, especially if they're a volunteer type coach. So I just want to let you and the community know that we are like turning over every rock, trying everything to get bus drivers, especially in Mountain View, where I get phone calls every once in a while from upset parents that there's no transportation. So we're trying. It's just a challenging situation.
Thank you, Scott. Go ahead, Ginny.
I had a question, Scott, around busing. I know a couple of towns around us have their DPW is short of staffed, and they've been putting out advertisements to contract for plowing services and haven't gotten a whole lot of answers back. I'm wondering, is Goffstown in that same position, or are
I
we
don't know,
okay?
but I've heard the same reports. Maybe Jared knows from being on the budget
Oh,
committee.
yeah, oh, dear.
All right, so yeah, it's so this is it's everywhere, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jared.
I'm paraphrasing what Adam said, but we have the same situation, and, Adam said that their contingency is they would pull people from the DPW to do the plowing if they were running out of people to plow at certain times. So that would be limited services, people that are actually going to the transfer station, if you will. But it's something that they also have, and hopefully, I believe that they're one of the 4 contracts that are coming up for the Teamsters. So hopefully with exactly what we had with the teachers, with the increase in pay, hopefully that's something that works for them as well, if it gets approved.
So that may be something that we have to think about in whether we have school remote or
Well, it's
snow
really,
days this
it's
year.
an important point, because when I'm making decisions about inclement weather, unless I know that DPW is short-staffed, I'm going to assume that they have a full complement of drivers and they're able to clear the roads. I know how long it takes them to do their runs. Same thing for New Boston. So it certainly would be important for me to know if they're short-staffed.
I'm going to send DPW an email now. I'll copy you, just to...
And please volunteer when I'm happy to call Adam when I get up to make the phone decision. The snow decision. Happy to call him at 4:15.
I think that the person is Mike Hillhouse, right?
Oh, Mike Hillhouse. Mr. Hillhouse doesn't want me to call him unless he is on call.
All right, so is there any other business? All right, so I need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
By Ellen. Do I have a second? By Retta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll